Have you ever felt like the more you understand, the less you belong? That intelligence, rather than being a gift, is a weight, a burden that separates you from the rest of the world. If so, you're not alone. The greatest minds in history have all faced the same curse. Intelligence is often seen as a blessing, a tool for success, a path to power. But what if I told you that the very thing that makes you exceptional is also what isolates you? That the more you see, the harder it becomes to connect, to belong, to find peace. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence was not a key to happiness, but to suffering. The ability to think deeply, to see beyond illusions, does not bring joy. It brings existential dread. Awareness becomes a prison. Knowledge becomes a burden. This is the dark truth of intelligence. Not a gift, but a nightmare. Let's break it down. The mind is a double-edged sword. To see the world clearly is to carry a weight that others will never feel. Intelligence grants insight, but it also reveals the absurdity, the contradictions, and the fleeting nature of all things. It is the silent curse of the thinker, the realization that what is obvious to you is invisible to most. Schopenhauer understood this burden better than anyone. He saw intelligence not as a gift that leads to happiness, but as a force that pulls one further from it. A highly intelligent person perceives nuances where others see simplicity, recognizes patterns where others see randomness, and anticipates outcomes before they unfold. This ability to comprehend more does not lead to contentment. It leads to restlessness. Imagine walking through a world built on illusions, watching others embrace them without question. The comforts of blind belief, the bliss of ignorance, the ease of simple pleasures. These are luxuries reserved for those who do not think too much. But the intelligent mind does not have that option. It is condemned to ask, why? Until every comforting answer unravels into deeper uncertainty. This is why those who see too much often struggle to feel at home in the world. The more they understand, the harder it becomes to relate. Conversations feel shallow. Social rituals feel artificial. The common joys of life seem scripted, predictable, even trivial. And yet, pretending otherwise is exhausting. For Schopenhauer, intelligence was not a path to power or success. It was an exile. To think deeply is to separate oneself from the herd. It is to see the strings of the puppet show and realize that no one else wants to. And in that moment, you understand the true weight of knowing. The greatest irony of intelligence is that the very thing that allows you to understand others is also what makes them feel distant. The more your mind sharpens, the more the world begins to blur. You notice the hesitations in speech, the contradictions in logic, the social games played without self-awareness. You hear what is not said, see what is not shown, and yet, in doing so, you set yourself apart. Schopenhauer believed that true intelligence was inherently isolating. The deeper you think, the fewer people can follow. Most conversations operate on the surface, a comfortable exchange of familiar phrases and ideas. But the intelligent mind seeks depth. It craves real discussion, real understanding. And so it asks questions that others don't consider, challenges assumptions that others accept. The response is almost always the same: discomfort. People withdraw, laugh nervously, change the subject. Not because they are unkind, but because they simply do not live in the same world. This is where isolation begins, not in the physical sense, but in the realization that you cannot be fully understood. You can observe, analyze, even predict the behavior of others, but they will never see the world as you do. You learn to filter your thoughts, to simplify your words, to pretend that the obvious is not obvious. You start to play along, not because you enjoy it, but because it is easier than the alternative. And yet, the loneliness lingers. It is not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people who will never truly know you. Schopenhauer called this the tragedy of the thinker, the eternal distance between those who see too much and those who are content not to see at all. To see clearly is to suffer, not because the world is necessarily cruel, but because it is indifferent. Intelligence does not just illuminate, it exposes. It strips away illusions, revealing the raw, unfiltered reality beneath. Most people navigate life with a layer of protective ignorance, a soft blur that makes existence easier to bear. The intelligent mind does not have that luxury. It sees the cracks in the foundation, the inevitable decay, the fleeting nature of everything that others take for granted. Schopenhauer saw awareness as a weight that only deep thinkers carry. The more one understands, the harder it becomes to simply exist. Every moment is overanalyzed, every pattern dissected. The small talk at a cafe becomes an observation of human behavior. A simple walk in the park turns into a meditation on time and mortality. Even joy is not immune. It is recognized as temporary, fragile, something already slipping away, even as it is experienced. This heightened awareness extends beyond the self. The suffering of others is not just noticed, but absorbed. The manipulation in politics, the artificiality of social structures, the cycles of history doomed to repeat, it is all painfully obvious. And yet, nothing can be done to change it. Intelligence allows one to see the flaws in the world, but rarely grants the power to fix them. For Schopenhauer, this was the ultimate curse of intelligence, the ability to perceive reality in its truest form, without the illusions that make it bearable. It is why those who think deeply often feel trapped, unable to retreat into the comforts that others accept without question. Awareness is a burden that cannot be put down, a lens that once acquired can never be closed. The mind does not rest. It moves endlessly forward, calculating, predicting, questioning. Intelligence is not just the ability to understand, it is the inability to stop understanding. Every decision is dissected before it is made. Every action is analyzed for consequences that others would never consider. The future is not a mystery. It is a set of probabilities, a chain reaction of events waiting to unfold. And in seeing too much, the intelligent mind often finds itself paralyzed. Schopenhauer believed that thinking too much was its own form of suffering. The ability to anticipate is useful in survival, but in excess, it becomes a prison. A simple choice: what career to pursue, where to live, whom to trust, becomes an exhausting mental maze. Every possible path is explored before the first step is taken. Every risk evaluated until the weight of all possible failures makes movement impossible. This is why intelligence does not always lead to decisive action. The greatest strategists in history understood the power of patience, but they also knew when to act. The overthinker, however, waits not out of wisdom, but out of fear. Fear of regret, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of consequences that others would not even consider. And yet, doing nothing is also a choice, one that comes with its own costs. Opportunities slip away, Life moves forward while the thinker remains stuck in contemplation. The world belongs not to those who see the most, but to those who dare to act. Intelligence provides foresight, but without the courage to use it, it becomes a burden rather than an advantage. Schopenhauer understood this dilemma well. The mind that sees too far ahead often forgets how to live in the present. Intelligence is rarely welcome. It disrupts, questions, challenges. In a world that thrives on conformity, the thinker stands apart, not by choice, but by nature. Society is built on shared beliefs, unspoken agreements, and comfortable illusions. To function smoothly, people must align their thoughts, accept certain truths without question, and move together as a collective. The intelligent mind, however, resists this. It does not accept blindly. It does not follow simply because others do. And for this, it is often met with resistance. Schopenhauer understood that the greatest minds in history were rarely embraced in their time. Their ideas were seen as threats, their insights dismissed or ridiculed. Those who think differently are not admired. They are viewed with suspicion. The world does not appreciate intelligence when it reveals uncomfortable truths. It values what is useful, what maintains order, what reinforces the existing structures. A brilliant mind that conforms is celebrated. A brilliant mind that questions is ignored, or worse, silenced. This is why many intelligent people find social interaction exhausting. Conversations feel predictable. Expectations feel restrictive. There is an unspoken rule to keep things simple, to avoid the discomfort of thinking too deeply. Those who refuse to play along are labeled difficult, arrogant, or detached. They are told to lighten up, to not overthink. But what others call overthinking is simply thinking. What others see as cynicism is often just clarity. For Schopenhauer, the struggle with society was inevitable. The thinker is caught between two options: suppress intelligence to fit in, or embrace it fully and accept the consequences. Most choose the former, wearing a mask to navigate the world more easily. But even then, the mind remains awake, restless, always aware of the cost of pretending to belong. The intelligent mind is never satisfied. It is not enough to live. There must be a reason, a purpose, a structure beneath the chaos. But the deeper one searches, the more elusive meaning becomes. Questions multiply faster than answers, and each discovery only leads to more uncertainty. What seems solid at first crumbles upon closer inspection. Ideologies, beliefs, even the foundations of morality, nothing is immune to scrutiny. Schopenhauer saw this endless search as a source of great suffering. The average person is content with pre-packaged meanings: religion, tradition, societal roles. These structures provide certainty, a framework for existence. But intelligence is a force that dismantles illusions. It does not accept easy answers. It pushes forward, stripping away each comforting layer until all that remains is the void. Some fill this void with ambition, pouring themselves into art, science, or philosophy. They create, not because they have found meaning, but because they are trying to build it. Others embrace nihilism, surrendering to the idea that nothing truly matters. And yet, even in nihilism, the mind cannot rest. The realization that life has no inherent meaning is itself a torment, because intelligence demands a solution where none exists. This is why so many great minds wrestle with despair. The ability to see the world clearly often leads to disillusionment. The pursuit of knowledge, once a noble endeavor, becomes an exhausting spiral. The more one understands, the more one sees the limits of understanding itself. Schopenhauer believed that intelligence is trapped in a paradox. It seeks meaning, but in doing so, often proves that meaning is an illusion. The result is a mind forever restless, forever unsatisfied, forever reaching for something just beyond its grasp. If intelligence is a curse, is there any way to escape it? Can the mind, once burdened with awareness, ever find peace? Schopenhauer believed that true wisdom was not just in thinking, but in learning when to stop. The mind, left unchecked, devours itself. It searches endlessly, questions everything, dismantles illusions until nothing remains. But there comes a point where even the most brilliant thinker must make a choice. Continue down the path of endless contemplation or step away from it altogether. For Schopenhauer, the answer lay in detachment, not in ignorance, but in the ability to see clearly without being consumed by what is seen. He found solace in art, in music, in beauty, the few things in life that exist beyond logic and reason. The mind seeks answers, but sometimes the greatest relief comes from surrendering to experience, from allowing something to be felt rather than understood. Another path to escape is through discipline. A restless mind is a mind without structure, one that wanders because it has no boundaries. Some of the most intelligent figures in history imposed strict routines upon themselves, not because they needed them, but because without them, they would be lost in thought forever. Action, even if imperfect, is often the only way to break free from the paralysis of overanalysis. Schopenhauer knew that intelligence could never be undone. The mind cannot unsee what it has seen, but it can choose how to engage with the world. The nightmare of intelligence is not in knowing too much. It is in believing that knowing is all there is. The greatest escape is not ignorance, but the wisdom to know when to think, when to act, and when to simply let go.